Hello, my friends. How are you? Welcome to another episode of 30 Albums for 30 Years. This is a global pop edition, and today we will be discovering the music of Brazil. I am your host, Jay Sweet. So Brazil is the largest country in South America. Much of its landscape is rainforest and the Amazon River. Their music is characterized by a blend of music from indigenous people and European and African influences. Samba is the most recognizable and iconic Brazilian musical form. The music originated in Rio de Janeiro during the Carnival celebration. And as with many South American musics, the rhythmic element of the music is paramount to its popularity. Brazilian music is very rhythmic. So we're going to get into all that. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, The Music of Brazil. So early on, the music that inspired samba in the late 19th century was polka music and a popular dance called the Mashishi, spelled M-A-X-I-X-E. The Mashishi is a type of walking two-step that found international popularity when promoted by the famed dance team of Vernon and Irene Castle. The music associated with the Mashishi was played by a small ensemble known as a choro. Choro bands were comprised of a guitar-like instrument and a lead wind instrument like a flute or a clarinet, then more American jazz instrumentation and elements filtered into choro ensembles, and eventually choro inspires samba. All right, so fair warning, please forgive me if I fumble some of this pronunciation, but the composer we're going to speak of now is known as Pixinguinha. That's Pixinguinha, and it's my understanding it's pronounced Pixinguinha. Born in 1897, lives till 1973. Brazilian composer, arranger, flautist, and saxophonist who was born in Rio de Janeiro, Pixinguinha composed popular choro music that integrated traditional choro and American jazz. So let's check him out. Our first song is Carinhoso, which means loving. It's one of Pixinguinha's most famous songs, and in the late 1920s, Pixinguinha was hired by RCA Victor to lead the Orchestra Victor Brasiliere, and during his tenure there, he refined his skills as an arranger. It was common for choro musicians at the time to improvise their parts based on simple piano scores, kind of like a jazz piece. Still, the growing demand for radio music from large ensembles required written scores for every instrument. They couldn't just go in and improvise. And Pixinguinha was one of the few composers with those skills, kind of like a Jelly Roll Morton early on with Dixieland jazz. Pixinguinha's arrangements were probably influenced by the sound of ragtime music and American jazz bands, and they became popular early in his career. When he released Carinhoso in 1930, he was criticized for incorporating too much of a jazz sound into his music. The practice has since been more widely accepted. Check out the vocal chorus that joins the musicians midway into the piece. It's a really gorgeous composition with fantastic orchestral and arrangement characteristics. At the end of this live performance, Pixinguinha announces the bandmates. I'll let him do that because he can pronounce their names way better than I can. So enjoy Pixinguinha's Carinhoso, which means loving. Let's talk about samba. The term samba comes from the word semba, S-E-M-B-A, which means belly bump. Most musicologists agree that samba music and samba dancing originated in Rio de Janeiro and an area known as Little Africa, which was mainly inhabited by former slaves and black business owners. The area became known for its parties during the carnival season. While many Brazilians were not happy with what they perceived as lewd dancing and music, others flocked to the area to participate in these activities. Samba dance eventually became more widely acceptable, and regional samba schools competed in events. Their performances incorporated not only samba music and samba dancing, but lavish costuming. Many of these schools' samba performances became a feature of the carnival festivals, and it became the national music of Brazil, samba did. One of the earliest practitioners of samba and one of Brazil's most famous songwriters and celebrities was Ari Barroso. Born in 1903, lives till 1964. And one of Barroso's most famous songs was Aquarela, Brazil. It was written in 1939 and it was included in the Oscar-nominated film Brazil in 1945. In addition to music, Barroso was a lawyer, a radio announcer, a writer, a producer, an MC, and a football commentator. The lyrics of Aquarela, Brazil speak of the beauty and the culture of Brazil, with mentions of the famed carnival celebrations, their beautiful beaches, cultural diversity, their rainforests, and their cities. Aquarela, Brazil has become the unofficial anthem of Brazil and an early example of samba music. Please enjoy. Let's talk about Carmen Miranda, born in 1905. Carmen Miranda was a Portuguese-born Brazilian singer, dancer, and actress who became an international superstar and was instantly recognizable for her lavish hats. Her hats often had fruit hanging from them. They were pretty wild. Carmen Miranda is considered the most famous interpreter of samba music. She was born in Portugal, but raised in Brazil, Rio, Brazil, and began recording in 1929, and her records sold well early on. After singing on Brazilian radio, she signed a lucrative recording contract with Odeon Records. Now, her fame came during a time when President Vargas was working on celebrating Brazilian nationalism and culture, so he helped support her career. Throughout the 1930s, Miranda continued to appear on radio and dominated the airwaves. Then in 1939, Lee Schubert offered Miranda a contract to perform on Broadway in a production called The Streets of Paris. Now, she would only do so if Schubert hired her band, as she did not trust American musicians to play Brazilian music. Schubert refused at first, but eventually conceded to her demands. Now, during the time when she came to America to perform on Broadway, Broadway producers like Schubert were worried, and rightfully so, that the 1939 New York's World's Fair would pull audiences away from Broadway. But Miranda's performance was met with great fanfare, and The Girl Who Saved Broadway from the World's Fair grew to U.S. fame. Miranda then appeared on a bunch of films, including the film Down Argentine Way, 1940, and she continued to appear in Broadway productions as well throughout the 1940s. South American Way is a 1939 song written by Jimmy McHugh and Al Dubin. Carmen Miranda introduced the song in the 1939 Broadway musical The Streets of Paris, and then performed it in the popular film Down Argentine Way, 1940. This caused it to become very popular in the U.S. So check it out, Carmen Miranda performing South American Way, one of her biggest hits. There you have it, South American Way. Now let's talk a little bit more about Carmen Miranda. Some Brazilians were not thrilled with Miranda. They felt that she was presenting a comical and negative cultural stereotype of Brazilians to the U.S. markets, but others praised her as the cultural icon that she was. At times, though, she was booed by Brazilian audiences when returning home, which deeply affected her. After World War II, Miranda's appeal began to diminish somewhat, but she continued to work regularly. In 1955, Miranda was struggling with an infection. I think it was a bronchial infection and addiction. And on August 4th, 1955, she appeared on the Jimmy Durante Show on NBC, but felt ill and even briefly collapsed during the taping. After which she returned home, hosted a small party, and then died of a heart attack at only the age of 46. Miranda was known for taking pills to cope with fame. More than half a million Brazilians escorted her funeral procession, and she was laid to rest in Rio de Janeiro. Brazilian musician Santano Veloso said the following: Miranda was first a cause of both pride and shame, and later a symbol that inspired the merciless gaze we began to cast upon ourselves. Carmen conquered white America as no other South American has done or ever would. Let's talk about Bossa Nova music, a form I really enjoy. Bossa Nova was popular in the late 1950s. It's a musical style that came out of Brazil and represented a softer, more romantic and sophisticated style of Brazilian music that was popular amongst the growing middle class. The music was still rooted in Samba tradition, but was more intimate and scaled down. The Samba costuming, heavy rhythms, and fanfare associated with the carnival and Samba tradition. So it was more relaxed, really. The main originators of Samba music were Antonio Carlos Jobim, Vinícius de Moraes, and Joao Gilberto. Antonio Carlos Jobim, born in 1927, lives till 1994, is generally considered the father of Bossa Nova music. Jobim popularized the form as a composer, arranger, guitarist, and singer, especially when he merged it with jazz in the early 1960s. Born in Rio de Janeiro, Jobim mainly grew up in the beachside community of Ipanema and played piano as a youth. His earliest influences included Brazilians like Pixinguinha, Ari Barroso, Heitor Villa-Lopez, and French impressionistic composers like Claude Debussy and Maurice Ravel. In the early 1950s, he worked as a studio arranger and writer for various artists. His popularity grew when he hooked up with lyricist Vinícius de Moraes to write the music for a play called Orfeo de Conciso. This is 1956, and it leads to the writing for the film Black Orpheus in 1959, a very popular film. A Felicidad is a bossa nova song by Antonio Carlos Jobim with lyrics by Vinícius de Moraes, composed in 1948 for the French film Black Orpheus. The film won several awards at the 1959 Cannes Film Festival and won in 1960 at the Academy Awards for Best Foreign Language Film. This brought worldwide attention to Jobim, Moraes, and the bossa nova music. It's a classic, so enjoy it with happiness. A Felicidad. One of the most important early contributors to bossa nova music was Joao Gilberto. Born in 1931, dies in 2019. Gilberto is a famed Brazilian singer who recorded his debut album in 1958, and it included two Jobim classics, Desafinado and Chega de Saudade, which is the song we're going to talk about now. Both songs helped to solidify the bossa nova music. Now, Chega de Saudade was first recorded in 1957 by a Brazilian singer named Elisete Cardoso, and it was released on her 1958 album, but few people took notice of the song, and then Gilberto recorded it in 1958, released it as a single, titled his album after the song, and it became a hit and helped to popularize bossa nova music. The English title is No More Blues, and the title Chega de Saudade roughly translates to Enough Longing. The song is about longing. And speaking about long, the song is long, the form anyway. It's 68 measures long, which is quite rare for a piece of this nature. The first 32 measures are in a minor key, followed by 36 measures in a major key. It's an absolutely brilliant piece. Check it out. No More Blues, Chega de Saudade, Joao Gilberto. Although it waned quickly, jazz was still commercially viable in the first half of the 1960s. But by 1964, jazz was becoming splintered into many subgenres, including free jazz, which is like playing without any restrictions, hard bop, which added more rhythmic elements to jazz, and more aggressive rhythmic style, and cool jazz, which mixed classical elements into the music. And then also some older forms as well. Swing music was still around somewhat, bebop as well. But some jazz fans found these forms either too aggressive, experimental, or classically oriented, or just old. So one subgenre that became popular during the early 1960s was Bossa Nova, which blended now with jazz. So jazz musicians were playing Bossa Novas, and it was a way of playing soft and palatable Brazilian music combined with jazz elements. Now, the style became associated with several figures, but Stan Getz was a famous American tenor jazz saxophonist who took to Bossa Nova pretty early on. Getz was known for his beautiful, sultry sound, and he was influenced by swing master Lester Young. Before presenting Bossa Novas, Getz had worked with modernistic big bands like Stan Kenton's band and Woody Herman's band. Those two bands blended Latin elements into their music at times. So by teaming up now with an American acoustic guitarist named Charlie Byrd, he helped to inspire a jazz bossa nova movement. And the recording that many cite as an impactful recording, or one of the first blends of jazz and bossa nova, is an album called Jazz Samba, 1962, released on MGM Verve Records. That's Getz and Byrd, Jazz Samba. Desafinado is a Jobim vehicle noted for its characteristic use of advanced jazz harmonies, gorgeous melodies, and irregular song form. Stan Getz and Charlie Byrd's version from the album Jazz Samba 1962 reached number 15 on the Billboard charts and was responsible for introducing bossa nova to a much broader audience, especially in the US. Beautiful piece, Desafinado. One of the most iconic albums of bossa nova music is called Getz Gilberto. The combination of Getz, Joao Gilberto, and Antonio Carlos Jobim works tremendously on this record. And Getz Gilberto was well received, particularly for a jazz record in 1964, selling over 500,000 copies. In 1965, the album won several Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, Best Jazz Instrumental Album, and Best Engineered Record. The award marked the first time a jazz record won Album of the Year, and the first time a non-American album won that honor. Also included on the record was Astrid Gilberto, Joao's wife at the time, who had never sung professionally before, bassist Sebastiano Neto, and Milton Banana on drums. Getz Gilberto is one of the most relaxing and brilliantly nuanced records ever made. I do an entire program on the album in season 1 of 30 Albums for 30 Years, so you should check that out as well. The most recognizable song from the album Getz and Gilberto is The Girl from Ipanema. It was a huge hit and is the most recognizable bossa nova piece worldwide. Jobim wrote the music as early as 1962. Vincius de Morales provided the original Portuguese lyrics, and then later on, Norman Gimbel added English words. The recording marked the debut of Astrid Gilberto's, Joao's wife, at the time as a vocalist. The choice to allow Astrid to sing happened in the studio when they decided to record English lyrics. Being the only Brazilian in the room who could also speak English, well, she was asked to try it. Untrained as a singer, Astrid had an exceptionally soft vulnerability to her voice. She almost sounds nervous, and it gives the recording a purity of innocence that perfectly matches the music and the lyrics. When Astrid and Joao's marriage broke up after this recording, she then had a relationship with Stan Getz. The single reached number 5 on the US Billboard charts, which was quite surprising given the current musical landscape. Throughout the recording, you'll hear Joao singing the original Portuguese lyrics. Then you will hear Astrid singing the English words. and a solo by Getz and also Jobim. Enjoy this classic, The Girl from Ipanema. Although short-lived, one of the major movements in Brazilian music came from Tropicalia music. From 1964 through 1985, Brazil's military influence over the government created an authoritarian state. Musically, the emergence of bands like the Beatles and other British invasion acts had a deep impact on Brazilian music and culture. By the late 1960s, dissatisfaction with the government encouraged many artists to speak out. The movement was partially inspired by a writer named Oswald de Andrade. Tropicalia music drew from various genres like rock, bossa nova, reggae, and folk, and those styles were used to accompany socially conscious lyrics. Musically, the leaders of the Tropicalia movement included Caetano Veloso and Gilberto Gil. Both men were briefly jailed in 1969 and found asylum in London after their imprisonment. This effectively ended the Tropicalia movement. Both Veloso and Gil returned to Brazil in 1972, and Gil actually eventually joined the government, serving as Brazil's Minister of Culture in 2003. Andar Confie is a popular song by Gilberto Gil and an example of Tropicalia music. The title can be translated to Walking with Faith. The lyrics display Gil's independence and defiance. Here are a few of the song's lyrics. Walking with faith, I am that I am, and I think what I think. I say what I say. I do what I do, I'm so much in motion, I'm walking the walk, I'm going to find my way. And Gilberto Gil certainly did. So enjoy Andar Confie, Walking with Faith. A term to be aware of is Música Popular Brasileira, or MPB. In the 1970s, MPB was a term that was applied to Brazilian popular music and represented a period in which more influences were filtered into traditional Brazilian music, more outside influences, such as rock, funk, jazz, and later hip-hop music. Sergio Mendes is a Brazilian musician who had crossover success and was popular in the US. Before he became a star, the pianist, singer, songwriter played with Antonio Carlos Jobim and many US jazz musicians like Cannonball Adderley and Herbie Mann. After working with his Sexteto Bossa Rio group, Mendes formed Brazil 66 and scored a huge hit with Mas Que Nada. He has remained relevant throughout his career, won a Grammy in 1993 for his album Brasileiro, and was nominated 6 other times. He was awarded a Latin Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2005. The song Mas Que Nada, which translates to Just Nothing, was written and originally recorded in 1963 by Jorge Ben. In 1966, Mendes covered the song with his group Brazil 66 on their debut album Herb Alpert Presents Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66. In 2006, the Black Eyed Peas re-recorded the song Mas Que Nada, and it's one of the most recognizable Brazilian songs. The lyrics translate roughly to this. Here's a few of them. Oh, come on, get out of my way. I want to pass through because the samba is animated. What I want is to dance the samba. Oh, come on. A samba like this is so cool. You won't want me to come to the end. All right, my friends, there we have it. We've made it to the end of today's program, and we've learned a little bit about Brazilian music, its rich and diverse musical traditions, and its significant impact on the global music culture. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you continue to check out some of this music. We've only just scratched the surface. I also hope that the pronunciation, please don't come and arrest me. As you probably can tell, Portuguese is not something I speak, so I tried my best, and I hope I did okay. And if I didn't, please let me know. So together, let's keep this music alive. I hope you check out more from the podcast. Have a great day. Peace.